just so I could see who's here. Because I can't read music when I wear them. All right, nice. Good to see you all. One of our earliest performances of the Baker Refractions was here in November of 2016. And we really enjoyed it, and other people liked it, and I was starting to fantasize about recording it. I was thinking, what would be good to go along with it? And so I thought of my friend, Dr. Mark Lomax. And I said, Mark, would you consider writing a cello quartet? And he said, well, I've got this big project going on. I was going to write a string quartet anyway. Yeah, how about a cello quartet, which is portraits of 4 women? And I said, great. And we've had a wonderful couple of years learning Mark's piece and recording both works, the Baker and the Lomax. And Mark is here today to tell us more about the piece and about the women and about his larger project. Thank you to Larry Griffin and OWU for hosting us today. And thanks for Chris Breck, who's our recording guy. Maybe we'll be on YouTube, we'll see. Maybe you'll be on YouTube. And thanks to my friends Hector and Miriam and Bo, who are back there. They have copies of our beautiful CD. I should have brought one up here to wave around. If you'd like to buy one, there's a sale today. 1 CD for 15 or 2 for 20. Christmas is coming, right? Okay. You can also download it, if that's your thing. But heard that one. It tickled my feet. Through the stage, that feels really weird. shorter and shorter. It seems weird to have intermission now, but we wanted
I'm
Mark
okay with that.
to say a couple of words about his piece before we go get a drink of water. Mark, could you come up and Dr. Lomax?
So Chris asked me to stand right here so he doesn't have to move stuff.
Great.
Hi, everybody. It's an honor and a privilege to be programmed with the great David Baker, whom I got to know a little bit during his time at Indiana University. As Mary suggested, or kind of told the story already, I've worked on a large piece, a 12-album cycle that was released January of this year called 400 An African Epic. And it really is the story of Black America from pre-colonial African history through the Ma'afa, 1619, when the White Lion Dutch slave ship brought the first 20 and odd Angolan Negroes to Point Comfort, Virginia, through today, and then the future where we all heal as one human family. And I had kind of planned this thing to have all this grandiosity, a symphony and all this stuff, and then I looked at what money I had in the bank and I said, well, there goes that.
Looks like cheaper music.
Right, cheaper music, yeah. And then Mary approached me with this opportunity and I said, well, there you go, you know, let's do that. And it was cool to be able to create music about 4 women in African-American history that for me represent, what's the best word, kind of templates or archetypes, thank you, of the women that I have known and learned from in my life and history. My wife and daughters being among them, my mother, my grandmothers, the women in my neighborhood growing up. I have so many moms, and they all have been strong. They all have been beautiful. They all have been, in their own way, politically savvy. They all have been able to manage poverty and wealth. They all have been able to do all of these things, all while just being mom. And I wanted to, in the work of kind of expressing what this life has been to be African, non-immigrant African in America, I wanted to capture that special existence, that strength, resilience, and power. And so these 4 women, Queen Nzinga, who was the first king, she demanded to be called king of her people in Angola. Ida B. Wells, who with the stroke of a pen began a war against lynching and supported, of course, the suffrage movement and all that kind of stuff. And Angela Davis, who was the first woman I know of to, you know, fight the state, in this case California and Reagan, walk into the courthouse like this with an afro and win. Like, that's amazing. And then Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who was a MacArthur genius at about 28, and her writings, speeches, lectures have been an influence on everyone who knows her work. And it was cool to tell those stories with 4 women, pun intended, who are amazing storytellers on their instruments and as an ensemble. So it's been great getting to know these ladies and working with them. We recorded everything in my front room, and so we've become family. Mary plays in my urban art ensemble, and we're playing actually a piece related to this work at Severance Hall in Cleveland on Martin Luther King Day. So if you want to make the drive a little further north, come on and hang out with us. So I guess you'll have me introduce the movements.
Tell about each lady as we
Tell about each lady, because the story is so important to the music, and I really wanted to make sure that the notes match the life, and they do a good job bringing it to life. So I hope you enjoy it. Go get some water.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
then I'll DJ. I'm a beatbox and DJ while they go. Oh, and buy their CDs because it's great. Sounds good. See you in a little bit.
Thank you, Mark.
again. So you might imagine that a woman's rise to power in the 16th and 17th century was not the easiest thing to do. Nzinga was the favorite of her father, the king. And after his passing, her brother, who was widely known as an idiot, took power. And so because he was not the most effective ruler, he relied on her to do a lot of things. She learned Portuguese to be a diplomat. She converted to Catholicism to get in the good graces of the Pope. She organized the Secret Service. She did all kinds of things, and yet her brother never really acknowledged it. He took advantage of her and just used her to further his ends. And so, as happens in royalty, he dies suddenly and mysteriously. And then Nzinga goes into this whole political thing to fill the power vacuum because most of the men in her ethnic group did not see her as fit for leadership, but the women did. And so over a period of time, she gained power. And part of that was actually being exiled from her kingdom, marrying into another kingdom, and as queen of that kingdom, marshaling those resources to come back and take her rightful place as king of her people. She fought against the Portuguese for 30 years and was never conquered. She rode horseback at the head of her armies, and all the time she was doing her best to keep her folks united, to keep everything going the way it should in face of countless tragic strife and trauma and craziness just of the time. And as a portrait, I wanted to show that she was a wartime king. And so the celli start with drums. And then I wanted to show that her life kind of had this up and down kind of thing. And so you hear what sounds like maybe a melancholy theme that kind of grows into something else and it builds. And she had a very spiritual life. And so there are moments of that. And you know, it ends as it began with the drums because she died in wartime. And so hopefully you hear all of the complexities of her life and everything that's going on in her, but most of all you hear a portrait of a strong woman, a strong king, who led her people in battle and made sure that they had everything they needed to be free and self-determining. Ida B. Wells. I keep finding the best word to describe her, and I haven't found one yet, except for like fierce. She was fierce. She left the South under the threat of death because of the work that she was doing, and got a call. There were two gentlemen in jail, and they needed her help. She knew that if she was found back in her hometown, it's escaping me right now, but if she knew if she was found back there, that she could very likely die. That did not stop her from going. She not only went back home, she put a disguise on, walked into the jailhouse, looked the guard in the face, demanded that these men be released. They were released, and she walked right out of the jail, looking everybody in the eye. And I can't imagine that her disguise was good enough for you not to recognize her. You know what I'm saying? Like, she couldn't put on blackface. I'm sorry, bad joke. You know, so what did she do? Or she wore a different hat or something? Like, so, you know, I mean, that's just how much intestinal fortitude this woman had, how dedicated she was to the liberty of her people, and how people depended on her. And it wasn't just black people. There's a lot of scholarship about her role in suffrage, and how even though she herself was not able to vote, she was a strong advocate for women's right to vote. And in this year, the 100 years since suffrage, I did not hear anybody celebrating her. Really, really interesting. And that's another reason why this piece is important, because, you know, the intent of the work is to elevate the stories of women, period, but particularly black women who we don't talk about. Ida B. Wells, you know, won a case against a train company who denied her first-class ticket, which she purchased, and made her sit in the back, long before Rosa Parks. We don't talk about that either. So this is a woman whose strength, intestinal fortitude, and grace, because she was able to bring people together, even though she was a staunch critic of the American system, she still brought people together from all walks of life to create something and do something for folks, even when she would not see the benefit. This piece looks to, you know, pull all of those things together. It's got a very, very strong, funky, Negro spiritually theme that wore Cora out when we were recording because of all of this kind of stuff. But we tried to capture that personality, and so we hope you enjoy this one. Ida B. Wells. Angela Davis grew up in an area of Birmingham they call Birmingham. She said in the Black Power mixtape, this documentary done by, I think it's the Swedish radio something, they asked her about violence because she was affiliated with the Black Panther Party and other black nationalist organizations. She said, violence? You asking me about violence means you have no clue what my family and my people have gone through. It's really interesting because in America, the narrative has always been one-sided. We talk about terrorism that others have perpetuated against America. We don't ever talk about the violence and terrorism America has perpetuated on its own people. Even the people that didn't choose to come here. She said, violence? My father and the men in my community have always had to have guns, but they didn't aim them at each other. They were protecting themselves from the white people in the community who dressed in hoods and robes and burnt crosses on their lawns. Violence? How many of you know that gangs, the Bloods and Crips, the Deacons for Self-Defense actually were organized in the first place to protect black communities from police? It wasn't until law enforcement, state-sanctioned gangs, wanted to remove the leadership from what we now call gangs, that they became gangs. No, they were protecting the neighborhood.
They were community watch, were they? No, neighborhood watch.
It was like, yeah, the neighborhood watch. Literally. Bloods and Crips, they're acronyms. Go look it up. Google. I don't have to, Google knows everything. And so you have the more militant aspect of the civil rights movement that was created after they watched King and their parents and grandparents march with a multiracial coalition and fail. Yeah, we got the Civil Rights Act, we got the Voting Rights Act, but what did that really mean? Brown versus Board happened in the 50s, but there are some places, like a community in Virginia, that shut down their schools for 5 years rather than integrate.
No.
Because you can legislate things, but you cannot dictate behavior. Violence? She asked. You don't know what we've been through. The 4 little girls who were killed in the church bombing were her friends. She had family members who were lynched. Violence? That's why Angela Davis has dedicated her life to human rights, to prison reform, to women's rights. And she's done it in a way that I think is not only brave, but really is a model for how we all should engage the world on behalf of others. She's an Aquarian. January 26th is her birthday. Aquarians unite. She doesn't know it, but I love her. It's like, Angela, be my guru, please. Come and just teach me everything. She decided to join the movement while she was studying for her doctorate in Germany and heard that Dr. King had been killed. And she joined, she came home, she got active. She was teaching, I think, at UC Davis, and some friends of hers got into an altercation, and the guns were registered to her. This is how she got caught up in the prison system. She was in solitary confinement for, I think, 18 months, and she had never pulled a trigger. What makes a black woman with a PhD so dangerous that we put her in solitary confinement as if? This is the narrative that we live with. They say the most feared person in America is an educated black person. Think about all the civil rights leaders. Dr. King. Huey Newton had a PhD. Did you know that? Black Panther Party. Angela Davis, PhD. I could keep going and keep going. All these folks were very well educated. And you wonder why the American public school system sucks now. All of these things are wrapped up into the life and work of Angela Davis. And this, of all, my music's not easy. I think they'll tell you that it's really easy, but I don't think it's easy.
Why did you look at me? I have a special part.
She does have of all the movements in this work, this is probably the most difficult. Because there's a part in here where they're all playing in like a different time signature. Everything is kind of going like this, and it's messy. Because that's the work that Angela chose to do. And really, she says she didn't choose it, it chose her. Because during the time where she was in a fight for her life against the state of California, you know, this global movement, Free Angela, happened. And it gave her a platform that she really did not want. But I'm thankful that she accepted that. And she's done fantastic work. Read her books, listen to her lectures. And it hopefully will do for you what it did for me, which is broaden my sense of what it means to be human and the role that we have, the responsibility we have as human beings to ensure that we are all able to live our most authentic and optimal life. And it's messy. And you're going to hear a lot of mess in this. The rhythms just, they're everywhere. But it starts with kind of an ominous Pitts theme that I think represents kind of what it's like to live in Birmingham. Like that's the name of you got bombed so much it's Birmingham, right? How do you live as a child under that constant threat of terrorism and then not be recognized for your humanity? Oh, it's your fault you're violent. It's your fault. Angela Davis. It's your fault, I said. You didn't know where I was going with that, right? It's your fault. It's your fault that you're a woman, so you can't be king, right? It's your fault that you're black and you're a woman, so you can't vote. You can't make as much as everybody else. You can't own anything. You can't. Up until now, each woman became who they are and were because we needed them to. Because we needed them to. Black America would not be what it is right now without black women. But guess what? White America wouldn't be what it is right now without black women. Because who suckled the children of the slave master? Who fed the families that owned humans as chattel? America could not be what it is without black women. The same is true of Chimamanda, who is interesting. She's Igbo. She grew up in Nigeria. They didn't have race issues. They don't have race issues in Nigeria. There's colonization, yes, but race, I mean, if I grew up around a bunch of people that look like me, do I have a term for race just cause? No, there are ethnic differences. But race, what is that? So, you know, she's from a well-to-do family. She gets sent to America to go to school. And then people tell her she's black, and she's like, what are you talking about? What is this thing black? It's a construct unique to Western contexts that didn't exist like we think it exists in other places until very recently. In fact, Ibram Kendi's book, oh snap, it's the one before How to Be Anti-Racist. He traces the whole racialized context back to Europe. And I believe it was a Portuguese prince who had a servant write this his heroic story about him and how he brought the savages to Christianity. He civilized them. And that was the first time that a collection of Africans from different ethnic groups were called black. It's very recent. This was late 15th century. Chimamanda comes to America. She's like, what do you mean I'm black? What is this thing? I don't get it. And then she had to figure it out because everybody told her, well, you're here, you're black. And so she develops this kind of dual identity, this double consciousness that W.E.B. Du Bois writes about in The Souls of Black Folk. And in her work, she talks about feminism. And in the West, white women in particular hear that and it means one thing. Black women hear that, it means something totally different. And ne'er the two shall meet in many cases. And so as I read her and listened to her lectures and interviews, I started trying to figure out who really understood what she was talking about. Because a lot of the questions are missing the point she makes. What I think we in the West don't understand is she grew up in a non-racialized context. So when she's talking about feminism, she really is talking about the role of women as compared to men in relation to power. She doesn't have all these other layers. Because when women, Western, white women, talk about that, oftentimes they forget about my wife. Pay equity, gender pay equity. We're having this conversation at my job. White women at my job are like, we need to be paid equally. And I'm like, yes, you do. And then I raise my hand because I have a question that's going to make people mad. Yes, Dr. Lomax. Well, when you say gender pay equity, what do you really mean? Do you also mean the women of color that work here? Because as the pay scale goes, white men make this, white women make this, black men make this, and black women make this. So if we're talking about pay equity, I think everybody should come up to the top. But if we're talking about gender issues, then black women have to be raised to the level of white women, and then let's talk about everything else. Or let's just make it all go at the same time. There are layers of complexity to these issues because of notions of race that happened really developed in the 15th century and throughout. Why don't we deal with those complexities, those nuances? What are we afraid of? I don't know. But what I do see in Chimamanda is that she doesn't care. She's going to be who she is because she was raised with a sense of self that allows her to walk no matter what other narratives people are imposing on her. She's writing from her truth, and she's going to let everybody else figure it out. That's tough. That's very cool. And I see black women having to be themselves in spite of all these other narratives. The angry black woman, the Jezebel, the this, the this, the this, the that. Everything but who they are. And what I really appreciate about Chimamanda is when she writes, she does not consider these other narratives. When she goes to make statements, when she speaks, she does not consider these narratives. She speaks from her truth. And her truth is fierce. And so I wanted to create a kind of funky theme. I'm thinking about her and her really cool gear that she wears. That's like a mix of Afro-urban New York meets Milan meets, I mean, she's just, you gotta check her out. From her hair to her feet, the shoes, everything. It's like she's just walking down some Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. She's just got this swag. And she's gonna be who she is no matter what. And then it's up to everybody else to figure it out, you know? And I think the beauty, the power, the resilience that black women have is because no matter what has happened, they've always been able to maintain a sense of who they are as authentically as possible so that I, as a black man, could be who I am. And so that we, as America, could be who we are trying to be every day. I think we owe that to black women, that gratitude for allowing us to do that, because without them, we wouldn't be here. And I think that is all kind of wrapped up and encompassed in the work of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.